Once upon a time, in the pixelated world of Minecraft, there was a brave and curious adventurer named Blocky. He was not like the other heroes who roamed the land. Blocky wasn't made of flesh and bone, like the villagers he met. He wasn't a hero with flowing robes or a shining sword, but he had something far more powerful, an unwavering heart and an endless desire for adventure. Blocky was made of blocks, just like the world around him. His head was a perfect cube, his arms and legs were rectangles, and his body was a sturdy shape built to withstand anything Minecraft could throw at him. He lived in a small wooden house on the edge of a lush forest, near a sparkling river. The villagers adored him for his courage, for he was always there to help when danger struck, whether it was fighting off a horde of zombies or helping rebuild a house after a creeper attack. But despite all of his small victories, Blocky felt as though something was missing. Life in the village was peaceful, perhaps too peaceful. Each day was the same: mining, crafting, building, and then sleeping under the stars. While most heroes might have been content with this, Blocky longed for something more. He wanted an adventure, something that would test him, push him to his limits, and show him just how brave he could truly be. One day, while Blocky was gathering resources in the forest, a strange noise filled the air. It was a low rumble, like thunder, but it came from the ground beneath his feet. The trees shook, and the birds scattered into the sky. Blocky stopped in his tracks and looked around. The rumbling grew louder, shaking the very earth. Is this it? Blocky whispered to himself. Could this be the adventure he had been waiting for? Before he could think any more, the ground split open before him, revealing a deep ravine. From the depths of the ravine, a giant, shadowy figure emerged, a creature unlike anything Blocky had ever seen. Its body was made of glowing red blocks, its eyes burning with an eerie light. It looked like a monster from the nether, but it was far larger, far more dangerous. The creature let out a deafening roar that echoed through the forest. Trees splintered and rocks tumbled as the beast's presence shook the very ground. Blocky's heart raced, but instead of fear, he felt excitement. This was the challenge he had been waiting for. This was the adventure he had longed for. The creature turned its gaze toward Blocky, its eyes narrowing. You are not like the others," the creature growled in a deep, gravelly voice. "What are you? And why do you dare approach me?" "I am Blocky," Blocky replied, his voice steady despite the monster's intimidating presence. "I'm an adventurer, and I've come to stop whatever it is you're doing here." The creature sneered, its claws scraping the ground. "You think you can stop me? Foolish hero. I am the Ender Warden, guardian of the end. The end is coming, and there's nothing you can do to prevent it." Blocky's eyes widened. The end. That was a place of legends, a world beyond the reach of ordinary players. But Blocky wasn't an ordinary player. He was a hero. And heroes didn't back down from threats, no matter how big or terrifying. "I don't care who you are," Blocky said, his sword clutched tightly in his hand. "I'll stop you, if it's the last thing I do." With a roar, the Ender Warden lunged at Blocky, its massive claws slashing through the air. Blocky rolled to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the creature's deadly swipe. He could feel the heat of its fiery breath as it passed by, leaving a trail of scorched earth in its wake. Blocky didn't hesitate. He jumped to his feet and charged at the Ender Warden, his sword raised high. The creature snarled and swung its tail, sending a shockwave of energy through the ground. Blocky stumbled, but he quickly regained his balance. He had fought monsters before, skeletons, spiders, even the mighty Wither, but this was something else entirely. The Ender Warden wasn't just a monster. It was an ancient force of nature, a being that had been bound to the end for centuries. And now, it had broken free. Blocky had no idea what the Warden's plan was, but he knew that if he didn't stop it now, it could mean the end of everything. The Warden lunged again, but Blocky was ready. He ducked under the creature's claws and slid between its legs, making his way to the back of the monster. With a swift motion, Blocky struck with his sword, but the blade bounced off the Warden's glowing red scales. "Ha!" the Warden laughed darkly. "You think you can hurt me with that toy? I am invincible. The end will be mine, and you will never stop it." Blocky's heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to give up. He knew he had to find a way to defeat this monster. The Warden's words echoed in his mind. "The end will be mine." What did that mean? What was the Warden trying to do? Blocky looked around frantically, his mind racing. Then he saw it. In the distance, atop a tall mountain, was a massive portal, the portal to the end. It was glowing with dark energy, and tendrils of black mist swirled around its edges. The Ender Warden wasn't just trying to destroy the world. It was trying to bring the end to Minecraft itself. Blocky's determination solidified. He wasn't going to let that happen. "I'm coming for you, Warden," Blocky muttered under his breath. He quickly scanned the area, looking for anything that could help him defeat the creature. And then, he spotted it, a cluster of ender crystals, floating high in the air above the portal. The crystals were radiating dark energy, powering the Warden's abilities. Blocky gritted his teeth. If he could destroy those crystals, maybe he could weaken the Warden enough to defeat it. It was a risky plan, but it was the only chance he had. With renewed purpose, Blocky dashed toward the mountain, leaping over obstacles and dodging the Warden's fiery attacks. The creature roared in fury and followed close behind, its shadow looming over him like a dark cloud. Blocky's heart raced, but he pressed on, determined to stop the warden's plan. As he reached the base of the mountain, Blocky saw the portal's dark energy swirling around him. He knew he didn't have much time before the warden would be able to unleash the full power of the end. With a final burst of speed, Blocky began to climb. Blocky scrambled up the rocky slope of the mountain, his hands gripping the rough stone. The Ender Warden was still close behind, its heavy steps shaking the ground. The air around Blocky grew colder and thicker as the dark energies of the end portal swirled above him. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of the world on his shoulders. Every second mattered. Every movement had to count. As Blocky neared the top, he saw the cluster of ender crystals floating above the portal. The crystals were pulsating with dark energy, sending out waves of power that filled the air with an unsettling hum. It was clear that the Ender Warden had been using these crystals to channel its strength, and if Blocky could destroy them, he might have a chance to weaken the creature enough to defeat it. Blocky gritted his teeth and pulled out his bow. It wasn't the best weapon for close combat, but it was perfect for taking out the floating crystals. He nocked an arrow and aimed carefully. The wind whipped around him as he released the string, sending the arrow hurtling toward the nearest crystal. The arrow struck true, shattering the crystal in a burst of purple light. The warden's roar of anger echoed through the mountain, but Blocky didn't falter. He quickly drew another arrow, aimed, and fired again. The next crystal exploded in a shower of sparks, and Blocky felt the ground tremble beneath his feet. The warden was getting closer, its fiery breath scorching the air as it flew toward him. But Blocky wasn't finished. He had 2 more crystals to destroy. The warden was closing in fast, its claws swiping through the air, but Blocky had no time to waste. He fired another arrow, hitting one of the remaining crystals. It shattered into pieces, and the warden let out a furious screech. The last crystal remained, glowing with an ominous light. Blocky knew he had to act quickly. He could hear the sound of the warden's wings flapping, growing louder by the second. With a burst of speed, he ran forward, drawing his sword. The warden was right behind him, its claws aimed for his back. Blocky dodged to the side just in time, narrowly avoiding the creature's attack. He took a deep breath and leaped toward the final crystal. With one swift strike, Blocky drove his sword into the last ender crystal. It exploded with a bright flash, sending a wave of energy through the mountain. The shockwave knocked Blocky off his feet, and he tumbled down the slope. He landed hard, but he quickly scrambled to his feet, his heart racing. The warden, now deprived of its source of power, staggered in mid-air. Its glowing red eyes flickered, and its movements became sluggish. Blocky could see that the creature was weakened, its strength fading. But it wasn't defeated yet. The Ender Warden let out a low growl, its massive wings flapping violently. It turned toward Blocky, its eyes burning with rage. You think you've won, the warden snarled. I am the guardian of the end. You cannot defeat me. You will never stop the end from coming. Blocky stood tall, his sword raised high. I don't need to defeat you, he said, his voice steady and strong. I just need to stop the end portal. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect this world. With a battle cry, Blocky charged at the warden, his sword gleaming in the dim light of the mountain peak. The warden tried to lash out with its claws, but its movements were slow and uncoordinated. Blocky was too fast. He dodged the attack and struck at the creature's exposed side, his sword sinking deep into its dark scales. The warden howled in pain, its body writhing as the dark energy within it began to unravel. Blocky pressed on, slashing again and again. With each blow, the creature grew weaker, its form starting to break apart. The warden screeched, its body shuddering as it fought to stay intact. But Blocky wouldn't stop. He knew that the Ender Warden was the key to stopping the end from invading Minecraft, and he wasn't about to let it win. With one final strike, Blocky drove his sword deep into the warden's chest. The creature let out a final, ear-splitting roar before collapsing to the ground, its body dissolving into a cloud of purple particles. For a moment, everything was still. The wind had stopped howling, the air was calm, and the mountain top was eerily silent. Blocky stood over the fallen creature, panting heavily. He had done it. He had defeated the Ender Warden and stopped the end portal from consuming Minecraft. But his victory was short-lived. As the warden's body vanished into the ether, the portal at the top of the mountain began to glow brighter. The dark energy that had once been channeled through the crystals now surged from the portal itself, crackling with power. Blocky knew that the danger wasn't over yet. No, this can't be happening, Blocky muttered, his heart sinking. The end portal was still open. The warden may have been defeated, but the end was still coming. Suddenly, the ground beneath Blocky's feet began to shake again. The mountain rumbled as the portal expanded, its edges stretching out like a hungry maw. From within the swirling darkness of the portal, strange shapes began to emerge. Endermen, dozens of them, began to materialize, their glowing eyes fixed on Blocky. But the Endermen weren't the only things coming through. A figure appeared at the center of the portal, rising from the shadows. Blocky's eyes widened in disbelief. It was the Ender Dragon. Blocky stood frozen, his heart racing as the massive shape of the Ender Dragon emerged from the swirling darkness of the portal. Its scales shimmered like polished obsidian, its wings stretching wide enough to cover the entire mountain peak. The very air seemed to hum with dark power as the dragon let out a deafening roar, shaking the ground beneath Blocky's feet. The Ender Dragon was real. And it was no mere legend. It was an ancient force of destruction, a creature bound to the end, now free to wreak havoc on the world of Minecraft. For a moment, Blocky felt a wave of fear wash over him. The dragon was enormous, its fiery breath capable of turning anything it touched to ash. How could he, a simple adventurer made of blocks, possibly stand against such a creature? But then, Blocky remembered why he had come here in the first place. He wasn't just an adventurer. He was a hero. And heroes didn't back down in the face of danger. Heroes didn't give up when the odds were stacked against them. They fought, they overcame, and they protected the world they loved. He gripped his sword tightly, his resolve hardening. "I'm not running," Blocky whispered to himself. "I'm going to stop you." The Ender Dragon fixed its glowing eyes on Blocky, its dark pupils narrowing. "Foolish hero," it hissed, its voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You cannot defeat me. The end is coming, and nothing you do can stop it. You will fall, just like all the others." With a powerful flap of its wings, the Ender Dragon took to the air, soaring high above the mountain peak. The ground trembled beneath Blocky as the dragon circled, its wings creating gusts of wind that sent rocks and debris flying. Blocky squinted up at the creature, trying to find a way to defeat it. He had faced many dangers before, zombies, skeletons, creepers, but this was different. The Ender Dragon was not only a fearsome beast, it was a manifestation of the very force that threatened to consume the world of Minecraft. And if it wasn't stopped, everything Blocky knew and loved would be destroyed. The dragon's glowing eyes flickered, and it released a blast of fiery breath toward Blocky. The flames shot toward him with terrifying speed. Blocky didn't hesitate. He leaped to the side, narrowly avoiding the fire that singed the ground where he had just been standing. The heat was intense, and the air smelled of sulfur. Blocky rolled to his feet and looked around. The Ender Dragon was circling overhead, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. Blocky had to think quickly. What could he do to bring the dragon down? Then he remembered something. The Ender Dragon wasn't just a powerful beast, it was linked to the End Portal itself. The dark crystals that had once empowered the Ender Warden were still in place, floating around the edges of the portal, radiating with the same dark energy. If the dragon was connected to the portal, maybe the crystals were the key to defeating it. With a burst of determination, Blocky sprinted toward the edge of the mountain, where the portal loomed. He could feel the portal's dark energy pulling at him, trying to draw him in. But Blocky wasn't afraid. He had faced worse dangers before. He could do this. As he neared the portal, the Ender Dragon swooped down, its claws outstretched, ready to strike. Blocky barely had time to react. He rolled out of the way just as the dragon's claws scraped the ground where he had been standing. The dragon's fiery breath followed, scorching the earth around him. Blocky scrambled to his feet, his eyes locked on the ender crystals floating around the portal. There were 8 in total, each one glowing with an eerie purple light. They were fueling the Ender Dragon's power. Blocky knew what he had to do. If he could destroy the crystals, the dragon would lose its strength, and the portal would collapse. But the crystals were high in the air, floating just out of reach. Blocky couldn't climb the mountain fast enough to reach them, and the Ender Dragon was making sure to keep him distracted. There had to be another way. Blocky's eyes flicked around the area, scanning for anything he could use to his advantage. Then, he spotted something, a pile of stone blocks near the base of the mountain. He didn't have much time, but if he could build something to reach the crystals, he might have a chance. Without a second thought, Blocky began to mine the stone, quickly crafting the blocks into a tall tower. The Ender Dragon roared in fury above him, swooping down to strike, but Blocky was already scaling the tower he had built. His hands were fast, his mind focused on the task at hand. As he reached the top of the tower, Blocky could feel the heat of the dragon's fiery breath just behind him. He didn't look back. Instead, he drew his bow and nocked an arrow. His heart was pounding, but his aim was steady. He took a deep breath and fired. The arrow flew through the air, striking the first ender crystal with a sharp crack. The crystal shattered into a burst of purple energy, and the Ender Dragon screeched in pain. Blocky quickly fired again, destroying another crystal. The dragon let out another roar, its wings flapping furiously as it tried to avoid Blocky's arrows. One by one, Blocky destroyed the ender crystals. Each time he shattered a crystal, the dragon grew weaker, its movements slower. The power that had once fueled it was beginning to fade. Finally, Blocky fired the last arrow, shattering the final crystal. The dragon let out a shrill cry as its body convulsed. Its glowing red eyes flickered, and the dark energy that had once surrounded it began to dissipate. The dragon's massive form began to shrink, its wings faltering as it fell toward the ground. Blocky stood at the top of his tower, watching as the Ender Dragon fell. It crashed to the ground with a mighty thud, its body dissolving into pixels. The sky above cleared, and the swirling energy of the portal began to fade. For a moment, everything was still. The world was quiet, and the danger had passed. Blocky had done it. He had stopped the Ender Dragon and saved Minecraft from the brink of destruction. But as Blocky stood there, catching his breath, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The end was still out there, waiting, and there were more adventures to come. But for now, the world was safe. Blocky smiled to himself. "This is just the start," he said quietly. "I've got more adventures ahead of me." And I'm ready for them.